So we're going to do just a brief little process now to kind of give a chance to each of you and then small groups to gather your thoughts and insights and questions based on everything that Pat just shared. And then we'll come back together into a big group to share some of that. And just to put this book out there too, for those of you who work with kind of group facilitation, this is a really great book that has a lot of different group processes for gathering insight and kind of harnessing people's genius in a group. So we're going to do a very simple process from this book right now called 1, 2, 4, all. And we're just going to take 2 minutes for each of you to kind of sit quietly for a moment, reflect on everything that just got said, and find what's your most burning question or insight from the last chunk of what Patrick was just sharing with us. We're going to take 2 minutes for that. Okay. Great. So now, if each of you will find a person who you don't know very well yet, who's sitting close by, we're going to have another 2 minutes now for each of you to take a minute and share what you wrote down and talk about it a little bit. So go ahead and find someone. Does anyone not have a partner? All right. Are you missing a person? You can talk with me. All right. Hi. I can sit. Yeah. What did you come up with?
What's that?
What did you come up with?
So I was really feeling impressed at hearing the large number of people that are sharing this experience of support in a very resilient community. And I'm wondering if part of the resilience of it is because, I mean, and like, excuse if this sounds like harsh, but like, it seems like to make accommodations for the outside world, the world surrounding, still operating on a very inhumane and hierarchical and exploitive world. Does that make sense? That's just, I mean, I'm not really like making a statement. It's just kind of this feeling that I'm confused about, you know, it feels like a halfway point, which is fine if it's better. It's like, compared to what we have in our system, our labor, it is dramatically better way of life. I'm just wondering, you know.
So I wonder, is the question, I'm sorry, go ahead. There we go.
Can we at least think further?
I hope so. Yeah, right. Or so maybe another way to frame the question would be, what's the transition plan to get from part way to full way? Or that's another question that comes up for me from that.
Do the people there have goals to progress into something more than just individual, you know, co-ops? I mean, it sounds wonderful and it's very resilient. I'm just wondering, you know, doesn't really fundamentally save the world.
Great. Hang on a minute, I need to yell something.
Okay.
30 seconds! 30 seconds! So it's kind of like, is it effective and impactful and transformative enough to really do the things that we need to do to survive as a species? I have the same question.
There must be this closeness there. And social, you know, deep depth that we lack. Which, you know, all of these things that are just better. What we have. Just wonder what more. You know?
Nice. Good. Well, I might be addressing that in a little bit when I'm talking. But totally, I'm with you. Great. Okay, and let's draw it to a close, please. Woohoo! 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 It's the owl hoot of attention getting. Okay, so now we're going to practice representing what we thought we heard the other person say, but in a larger group of 4 now. So each of these couples, we'll call them, come together with another pair And now we're going to take a minute per idea, but I'm going to represent my partner's idea from the last time to the group, okay? We're going to take 4 minutes and share that. So now we get to try to make succinct and find the essence in what we think the other person was saying. All right, we're going to take 4 minutes for this.
I'll start off with what Danny said. Okay. Danny was saying in his analysis of his work, creating the best caretaker in the Bay Area, was people there not committed to the co-op idea. Yeah, these committed co-op folks, you need to bring in new material, new folks to be introduced into this business and succeed at it. Building a co-op from a bigger base than just already committed co-op folks.
Bob was saying that because the BAST have a very solid foundation of mutual aid cooperation, that he was saying that it was very important that they focus on education as well. They're positioned well to educate others and to sort of saying complementary things, I guess, for the people who aren't already into that way of thinking. It's a good thing that they're focusing on education and help other people understand why it would be better or preferred or easier.
That they want to scare somebody in. I feel kind of guilty because I feel like I kind of rambled on and I didn't actually like that many insights.
What's your name again? Alex. Okay, represent yours. Okay, so I heard you say was the Mondragon model, like we just heard about it. She wonders if it is transformative enough to actually address the challenges we're facing on the planet right now. Like it goes a long way, it's a lot better in a lot of ways than what we have in splintered American society, but then still you wonder if it really addresses the deep underlying social and ecological challenges that we're facing. Is it? Yeah, and I guess there was an implicit in what would it take to have it truly address those deep challenges.
Does success in part rely on the outside world not having that same money?
Is it kind of a pyramid scheme or something in a way? That'd be right?
Yeah, essentially, yeah.
It sure will be a challenge.
Ron was saying, I know Ron from past meetings that he's given, and he was saying, how do we organize to teach these people, and how do people who are, I know like him, who's given so much to the community and the consciousness, how does he get supported?
Just one thing is how to leverage our energy. How can my energy be leveraged, and how can it be leveraged with other people's energy to actually organize? Because I think the whole model is corporations know how to leverage, and we don't. And what I heard from you is that the question of how do we educate, how do we, which I thought was really fit with what I was thinking, is how do we educate the masses and do it in such a way that I think what you were talking about is for some of us that are aging,
the elders.
How can we offer our wisdom, our gifts, our experience, our understandings, even our failures, to help pull this.
Great question. Hope we get into that in the next hour. I said I hope we get into that in the next hour. All right, well, we've got 40 seconds. Anyone else want to share any more things?
I think a lot of us are reactionary against corporation, period. The whole consciousness that we've been living with for so long. And then so so many of us who have been in entrepreneurial activities, even if it's a multi-level marketing, so often the product is really worth it, but because it has a stigma that society is put upon it, not allowing us to really be all that we can blossom into what we can be. So it's the old ones, we kind of have to get past the stigmas, and the new ones to open to be able to educate and start experiencing it together.
Right. Thanks, y'all. We're going to come back to the big group now. Okay, let's close it up. Come back together, please. Finish the thought and come back together. Okay, so we're going to take 5 more minutes now as a whole group. And obviously there are a lot of people and a lot of ideas, so just ask you to really cook. If you want to share something now, the whole group, cook it down to its essentials and try to share succinctly so we can have a number of people share. Let's start with a question without a known answer. Does someone have a question that came out of this that you want to share?
Yeah, kind of our whole group kind of had one question, which was how, and I hope I'm doing you guys all justice, but how do we make this happen in the United States? How do we create it here?
We thought you'd never ask. All right. Okay, great. All right, let's take an insight now. Something that's not a question, but an insight.
That we do have some shared fundamental religious values in this country.
Huh?
Not the surface issues, but the values of like the golden rule, or, the fundamental that goes with all religions.
All right, I'm not going to debate you, I'm just going to write it down. All right, another question.
How is conflict dealt with?
Ooh.
I'm sorry. How is conflict dealt with? How is conflict?
What else?
Insight. The communities that I work with are usually lower income, and my experience with lower income communities are people want to help each other more readily. Like if your vehicle is on the side of the road and you've stalled out, someone will stop and ask you if they can help you, or just helping each other in a way that I don't know. It just seems kind of natural. But then communities that are more wealthy tend to, in my view, isolate themselves. They have enough money, they can buy whatever they need. They don't need to help each other out. And so there's quite a bit of stark difference in lower income communities and wealthy communities in the United States. My question is about solidarity and how the people in Mondragon have maintained solidarity in the fact that now they have safety, they have incomes, they have their social needs hopefully met, and how do they not lose solidarity, whereas in the United States,
Higher income meant more independence rather than interdependence. Interesting observation. Mm-hmm. What else?
I think one of the biggest things that I come back to, which I really love, is what Patrick was bringing up about the value of we're recognizing multi-generational, and it's the family units. So now it's not just individuals and their jobs. We're a greater family, an extended family, and that energy brings us all together in a solidarity that nothing else compared.
Yeah, and just to throw in a piece of language on that, or clans, what anthropologists call clans, which is a word for an extended family that's intergenerational in character, right? Is a kind of a archetypal organizing pattern of human cultures. Yeah, back there.
Question is, how do you pull all this off in a gentrification atmosphere? I think we're way behind the curve here.
Yeah, I was just at I'm taking the Building Bridges training right now, and which is this racial equity training, and there were some folks there from the Black community talking about their historical experience in Asheville, and it was gentrification was the main theme of their experience. It's like totally fractured their communities, and that's a microcosm of what's happening in the rural landscape as well, I think, with some different causes and so on. But it's a deep challenge there with land values and land access. And let's say Claire and then one more. Yeah.
So I lived near my kids in Ozark area, Missouri, Southwest Missouri for a year and a half. And down there for 3 years now, they have a successful group that's called Red Hawk Lodge. They've got established guilds. So they have a birthing guild, they have an herbal guild, they have a builder's guild. This is a large square mile area, and it is in watersheds, and that's how they delineate their spaces. But they've got dying covered, they got kids' education and childcare, and they meet together on a big piece of property 3 times a year for a picnic, and that's how they started having this conversation. But I really appreciate and like what they're doing.
And sorry, where is this?
Ozarks.
In the Ozarks in Arkansas. Wow. And are they an actual IRS designated mutual aid society? Do you know?
No, I don't know.
Okay. No, I'm just curious because you start talking about all those different functions. I'm like, wow, that sounds like an old school, actual legal mutual aid society. And y'all, there's a 501c8 status is in the U.S. is the IRS tax designation for mutual aid societies. So it's a big historical basis. We'll talk more about that in a second. Yeah.
Can you briefly say your connection to the group is in Wisconsin?
To humans. Yeah, sure. There's an organization called HUMANS, which is a really great acronym, I think. Humans United in Mutual Aid Networks. Stephanie Rearick is the founder of that and the director. And it's an international reach organization that's kind of a meta process helping to mentor different regional mutual aid initiatives around the world, mostly at this point in the UK and Australia and New Zealand and the US. So we are working with them, and we're an official pilot project. Co-operate WNC is an official pilot project of humans, and we're working with them to set up this summit. A 5-day mutual aid summit that'll be at the end of August this year. That's going to be kind of a culmination of all the work that's been done so far and a bigger public reveal that still there's a lot of design to be done based on who gets involved and what we decide the priorities are. But that we have that set up with Stephanie Rearick coming down to help with that at the end of August. Yeah. Okay, one more comment or question. Great.
Is Mondragon the vision for mutual aid in our region? What is the vision? What are the limits of that vision? What's the trajectory we want to be on? Aside from the practical goals, the trajectory.
Let's do like an hour-long answer to that question. I think that whole presentation is going to... Yeah. No, but seriously, thank you for the great segue because I think that... So who here is familiar with the term patterns language? All right, so we got I actually almost brought that book today and forgot to bring that one, but there's a book called A Patterns Language, which is put out by Christopher Alexander and a bunch of his colleagues in the 70s, which was based on architecture, and they were studying the history of pre-industrial architecture. And what they ended up discovering is that they had to create, or they had the opportunity to create what they ended up calling a patterns language. What a patterns language is summarizing and distilling the most successful patterns out of all the historical examples they could find of the way that humans put our settlements together, all the way from large landscape scale, like where we locate villages in the landscape of mountains, down to how a porch is designed, all scales in between. And they created what we call the patterns language, which is summarizing each of those best ideas in a short phrase, like settlements on the mid-grade slope. That's a pattern around the world. We don't put our settlements in the floodplains, and we don't put our settlements on the ridge. We put them on the mid-grade slope, right? And then the cold air settles away from the settlement, whereas if you put it down in the bottomland, you're getting flooded and you're getting frost pockets up against your gardens, right? And you don't put it on the ridge where you have to build a road to the ridge and try to get water up there. You put it on the mid-grade slope. So that's a pattern. So now you know, if you're designing an eco-village or something, just go ahead and look for the mid-grade slopes. You don't have to go through 50 years of trial and error to figure that out, right? So is in the bottomland, right? And then it should be forested on the steep slopes and ridges in most cases. So that's a pattern. And then you string these patterns together And you're basically summarizing thousands of years of lived human experience in these nuggets of wisdom, and that help you to then create the design framework for a given scenario, right? So since they created that term patterns language, people have been creating patterns languages around all kinds of things, around computer programming, permaculture, farming, electrical design, right? It's just a really good way of capturing all that intergenerational experience. So what we're really looking at, I think, is a patterns language of mutual aid, and recognizing that there is an incredibly diverse history of mutual aid, so much so that it's hard to even say this is what's mutual aid and this isn't mutual aid or something, right? But that if we can create a patterns language of mutual aid, then that's drawn from literally thousands of historical examples and current examples of people practicing it, and that's going to allow us to replicate the patterns for each situation that work the best in that situation, right? Because it's always going to be situational design, just like permaculture, right? There's no the best garden design, the best house design. It depends on your climate, it depends on the circumstances, on your goals. Same thing with mutual aid. So with Mondragon, I think my impression, like Pat was saying, is that it really arises from a unique culture, right? It really does, and they have this shared language that is the only language in its family, in its language family in the world, right? It's an indigenous pre-Indo-European language, and that's arising from thousands of years of kind of isolated mountain lived experience and agricultural practices and economies that go with that. And so we're not the Basques, and we won't be the Basques. And some of the things, some of the DNA of what works there is appropriate here, and so in some cases other types of DNA are appropriate here, right? So that's a big part of what we have to do if we're going to do anything that's going to work and be alive, is really find the patterns that make sense here and not kind of fundamentally not be fundamentalists and stick to things that won't work here, right? But to back up from that. I think that the culture piece of this, to me, is a lot of the origin point for how I got into it, recognizing that culture is like, it actually acts, I think, just like topsoil, right? Culture is something that accumulates over time from people living and dying and living and dying, and then it accumulates over time. And just like topsoil, when topsoil is created, then the capacity of the system grows every generation as you have deeper and deeper topsoil. But also, it can be lost very quickly. Culture can. It can be eroded very quickly, right? And in a lot of ways, in this time that we are in a cultural clear cut, where a lot of the kind of, to just extend the imagery and the metaphor, and we'll tie that back around too with the biological imagery that we have, I think, going for the Co-operate WNC. Just to give a teaser there, the imagery is like all of our old trees, which were our old ancestral cultures, many diverse ones from many different places, have been cut down, clear-cut logged. And then what happens when those cultures are cut down, they've been cut down by industrialism, really. It's like there's been a systematic destruction of indigenous lifeways across this planet for thousands of years, and culminating in the Industrial Revolution. And for instance, the Enclosure Act. Who knows about the Enclosure Act in Britain? Right, what was the Enclosure Act?
The common spaces.
Yeah. So the simplest encapsulation of it is that the commons in Britain got broken up into private property. Okay? That wasn't an isolated thing, though. That was part of a broad cultural genocide program, really, is what that comes down to, that had begun before the Inquisition, actually, right? Like, long time ago. Yeah, totally. And the way that is there are certain forces in human consciousness that end up wanting to hunt down the things that are indigenous and the things that are kind of communal, and wants to turn them solvent and extract them. That's an element in human consciousness, I believe, that is present in every people and every time. And sometimes we have cultural ability to kind of not go down that route, and sometimes we do go down that route. but that thing has hunted down the indigenous, and so it broke up all the common land in Britain, which was allowing people to farm collaboratively and have true commons managed over multi-generational time periods, privatized it all, forced people into that compartmentalized economic existence, which then made it impossible for them to live that way in the face of all the pressures of survival, so that they became willing to go work in factories in Britain, right? That's the way that you get people willing to work in factories, is you break up their culture so that then they don't have their basic needs met, and then they have to go work for whatever will basically keep them alive. Does that sound familiar from the United States?
Get on a boat and go to North America.
Yeah, that was one of the results of that, exactly. So cultural topsoil, it gets washed away, and in one generation, just like when topsoil gets washed off to a mountain, it gets washed away, and then just like topsoil on a mountainside does, it takes a long time to reaccumulate. You can't just reconstitute topsoil no matter how much money you apply to it, right? It's a process of living and dying and decomposing and living and dying and decomposing. So culture acts like that. And for me, like, this project comes from how do we regrow a truly life-giving bioregional culture in this region? That's really the source of this work for me. And that means a lot of things, because when you start getting into it, culture isn't different than economy, right? That's a false dichotomy of the industrial age. That's, again, a division. It's like you take what we now call economics and compartmentalize it from daily life, so that economics becomes transactional instead of relational, right? Transactional means if I want something from Pat, I just want to get that thing from Pat, and it doesn't matter the less tangible or countable parts of our relationship that have to be sacrificed for me to get that thing. Yeah, otherwise known as business, right? Whereas that's transactional. In a relational economy, because, like Pat was saying earlier about Mondragon, with the family structures and the clan structure essentially of it, there's accountability, because I don't get to just fire someone and then pretend like that's not impacting my community. It's going to impact my community, right? We're going to be related somehow. I'm going to hear about it. Someone's going to kick me out of something because I insulted and didn't help take care of this person in the community. There's a relational ecosystem around economic activity. And so in my estimation, we're not going to have a sustainable economy and approach to land use and being human until we get economics back into the relational instead of just transactional. So that's like really what all of this is about, is how do we transform our economic behavior to be relational, and so that the economic forces tend to reweave the web of life instead of tearing apart the web of life.